Sometimes romance can begin to flourish when you're least expecting it. And when Tyler Tips and Brittany Wright first met at a work event in July 2017, they may have had no idea how their paths would cross again in the future. After Tips and Wright's initial meeting, though, the pair each found themselves the recipients of devastating news. But before we start, please give the video a like and make sure to subscribe to WonderBot and hit the bell so you'll never miss any uploads from us. Dallas resident Wright was a married woman when she arrived at the Seattle conference during the summer of 2017. Since 2011, she's been plying her trade as a principal wire clerk at Gateway Mortgage Groups. And Tips, too, was hitched at that time, although he actually traveled to the event from Oregon as a representative of Save Haven Security. After both Tips and Wright made their way to the conference, though, they encountered each other, and apparently they hit it off pretty quickly. What's more, according to Wright, the pair had several things in common to boot. Tips and I instantly gravitated towards each other because of our personalities, Wright told Inside Edition in February 2019. It was strictly a friendship, and we really just opened up with each other. We were both married and both had bad marriages and confided in each other because we both understood. Tips has also suggested that the duo even joked about their failing relationships. When I met Brittany, I was just like, hey, my marriage is way worse than your marriage, he told Del Sol Photography in September 2018. Way worse than yours is. And she's like, no, mine's way worse. Ultimately, though, Tips and Wright would have to part ways and return to their respective spouses. Yet ahead of Wright's trip back to Dallas, she received a stunning text message from her husband. A message, in fact, that would go on to shape the rest of her life. We were both leaving the conference on Sunday, Wright recalled to Del Sol Photography, so Tyler and I were saying goodbye, and I stayed back with some of my friends. I then got a text message from my husband saying I want a divorce. Incredibly, though, she wasn't the only one to receive similarly bad news that day. While Wright was processing what had happened to her, you see, Tips was trying to contact his wife back in Oregon, but he failed to get a reply. Curious as to what was going on, he, therefore, turned to one of his friends living in the neighborhood, and the subsequent response left him crestfallen. I tried calling my wife, and the phone was off, Tips later recalled. So I call my buddy who lives next door, and he's like, yeah, about 3 days ago, I saw her driving away with a trailer full of stuff. She left. So I called Brittany, and I go, you'll never guess what. And given that Wright herself had just heard about her own relationship, she may well have been able to relate to the emotions that her new friend was going through. Perhaps with this in mind, then, she shared her own bad news in an attempt to soften the blow. Wright explained to Inside Edition, a couple of hours after I got the text message from my husband, Tyler called and said, my wife's gone. She packed up all her stuff and left. I could hear he was just devastated, and I told him that if it made him feel any better, I'm moving out when I get home. Given the events of that day, Wright and Tips then shared a very similar observation during their conversation. We were just like, this is really weird. Wright later recalled to Del Sol Photography, and from that point, the pair went on to establish a close friendship despite the long distance between them. As time progressed, though, Wright and Tips' relationship turned romantic, with a Colorado wedding serving as the scene for their first date. And in January 2018, their respective divorces had finally been confirmed, leading to another significant moment in their lives. Yes, that month, Tips proposed to his new partner. Wright agreed to marry him too. However, the Dallas woman was somewhat cautious in sharing her good news. I was more hesitant to tell everybody about the engagement because I had just gotten divorced, she said to Inside Edition. I felt terrified. I thought people were going to judge me, but I knew that's what I wanted. Meanwhile, Wright and Tips were still living in different states, and the pair had no immediate plans to relocate, even despite their engagement. That all changed, though, when Tips received a fortuitous request from his employer. Yes, his boss asked the Oregon man whether he would move to Dallas, since his job was being transferred to the city. I was like, this has to be a sign from God, because we weren't really talking about moving. Wright said of her initial reaction to the news, we were just going to be engaged and do long distance for a while. This is something that has to be meant to be. All the stars aligned, Tips added. Everything happened for a reason and it was perfect. Wright, meanwhile, has gone on to speak about the timing of that first meeting in Seattle and the events that followed. And according to the Dallas resident, her initial friendship with Tips opened her eyes. When I met Tyler, there was a tangible thing for me to see that there was somebody else out there. Wright told Del Sol Photography. So when I got the text message asking for a divorce, in my heart I just felt peace, like this is meant to be. And it has nothing to do with Tyler, it was just the timing of it. Nevertheless, Wright felt the need to point out that she and Tips hadn't initially intended to split up from their respective spouses. We were both devastated. We didn't want our marriages to end, but they did, she revealed. We have each other to go through that, and it was really special. Wright added, it was really special. And Tips has since spoken about the relationship that he shares with his partner too. In his mind, she loves him through thick and thin, regardless of his habits. It doesn't matter if I gain 20 pounds or 30 pounds. Wright still loves me, Tips said. It doesn't matter if I eat a cheeseburger. She still loves me. You know, it just doesn't matter if I fart. She still loves me. She'll always be there for me. It's an unconditional love. And perhaps that bond was strengthened through how Tips had first managed to build his relationship with Wright. He explained, you know, our romance was developed around a really good, tight friendship. When I was broken down and in the worst situation I could possibly be in, she was there. Naturally then, Tips was delighted when Wright accepted his proposal. She ended up like, hey, yeah, I'll be with you for life, he recalled. And I'm like, for real? But of course, the pair had gone through some hardships in order to get to that point, as Wright later explained while talking to Del Sol Photography. Indeed, after Tips had admitted that he'd been broken by his divorce, Wright had been forced to confront some personal issues of her own. I felt like God had brought a mirror in front of me because I was lying to myself, she later said of that period. It drew that out of me, and I realized it wasn't okay. Then all of a sudden, I just had this amazing guy that was everything that I could have ever wanted, Wright added. And the duo ultimately cemented their bond by tying the knot in September 2018, just over 12 months on from their first meeting in Seattle. Specifically, Tips and Wright wed in Riviera Maya, Mexico, surrounded by their loved ones on a sun-kissed beach. And prior to exchanging their vows, the couple shared some heartwarming words about each other to Del Sol Photography. The bride-to-be was particularly thoughtful with her message too, as she offered a deeply personal insight into her emotional state at that moment. I thank Tips for loving me in a way that I never believed that I deserved to be loved, Wright revealed before her wedding. I thank him from the bottom of my heart for loving me at a time where I felt I was dead on the inside. He was a revival for me. And the groom echoed those sentiments in his message, further illustrating in the process how important the couple have been for each other. You're the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life, Tips said of his soon-to-be wife. I can't wait to share the rest of my life with you because you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Thank you so much for choosing me, and I love you. Wright added, for us, it was timing. It was definitely not our plan to wed. It was all good changes, but it really threw us for a loop because our whole entire world changed. Even so, she added, it all changed for the better.